Now let's explore type conversion, also known as type coercion. What is type conversion in Python? Type conversion is the process of converting the data type of a value from one type to another. It can happen automatically, that is implicit type conversion, or can be done manually, also known as explicit type conversion or typecasting. Now, first starting with the implicit type conversion or coercion. Python automatically converts one data type to another when doing an operation between mixed types without loss of information. Now, let's look at an example of implicit type conversion. Now let's say we have a is equal to 5, which is an integer value. Then we have b is equal to 2.0, which is a float value. And then we are saying c is equal to a plus b. Now what is happening is that an integer value plus a float value. Let's see what does it give us. So when we run it and when we try to print the value of C, it returns 7.0. That means int plus float gives us a float. Now let's look at the type. So let's do print, then we do type, and then we do C. Now let's look at the type of the variable C, which is the sum variable. So it is showing us float. So why does this happen? Python promotes the integer value to float value to avoid losing precision. Now there are certain rules for implicit type conversion. First is that it happens only when it's safe to convert data. That is, there is no data. It happens only when it's safe or no data loss. Then it also happens in mixed type operations. Python follows a data type hierarchy when doing implicit type conversion. So integer plus float is equal to float, and float plus complex value is equal to complex. Now let's look at explicit type conversion or typecasting. Explicit type conversion or type casting. The programmer often forces a conversion using built-in functions. Now, for example, if we have an integer function, it converts to integer. Now, the float function converts the value to a floating point number. Then we have the string function that converts it into a string value, and the bool function converts the value to a boolean value. List function, tuple, set function, they are all the collection type functions. Now let's look at the example below. First, starting with the integer function. That is, it converts the integer, it converts to integer, and it removes the decimal value. So let's look at an example for this. Now let's say we have x is equal to 9.81. Now if we print integer, and we convert x to an integer value. So let's look at the output. We get the output as 9. So what does it do? It truncates or chops the decimal part, but it does not round the value. So this is an important point to remember. So here we can mention that it truncates or chops the decimal value, but does not round the value. Next, let's look at the float function that converts to float. Alright. Now let's look at an example. Let's say we have x is equal to 3. Now we print the value and give it a float function and convert 3 to a floating number, float of x. Now let's see, when we print it, it gets converted to 3.0. So x, which is equal to 3, an integer value, gets converted into a floating point value. Now moving on to our next example, which is, let's look at the string function that converts any object to string. Let's take an example of x is equal to 42. Now let's print string of string type. Let's look at the bool function. Bool converts to true or false. Print bool 0 gives us false. Print bool 3.14 gives us true. And print bool empty string gives us false. Now let's look at some of the common pitfalls in type conversion. That is truncation versus rounding. Using int 4.9, if we give this, we get the answer as 4 and not 5 because Python just truncates it. It does not round 4.9. Next is string to number conversion. Now if we give integer string 1 to 3, it works fine. This function works fine. But if we give int string ABC, it throws a value error because ABC is not numeric. So how will it get converted to int? Next is incompatible conversions. Float of ABC fails too. Python cannot turn letters into numbers. So let's look at some of the summary points. Mixed math operations promotes lower to higher type. When we are doing integer plus float, Python upgrades the integer to a float automatically. Integer function removes the decimal part. If we give integer 7.8, it gives us 7. It cuts off the decimal without rounding. Float function adds 0.0 to integers. Like float of 9 becomes 9.0. It just adds a decimal point. Only numeric strings can be converted. 1 to 3 converts fine, but ABC can't be turned into a number. Since string 1 to 3 converts fine, but string ABC can't be turned into a number. Bool and falsy values like 0, none, empty lists, and empty strings are treated as false in Python.